أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. We start the second session of RSR 2014 with explanation about one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we recite it 5 times a day in our salat, and it is Malik Yawmuddin. This name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in Surah Al-Fatiha, and we recite A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmuddin. Maliki Yawmuddin means the owner of the resurrection day. So today I want to talk about the ownership and the definition of owner. What do we mean when we say that Allah Ta'ala is Malik, or the owner? And what is the meaning of ownership of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala? But before that, let me analyze the meaning of ownership when we use this term for us as human. What do I mean when I say that I am the owner of this house, or I am the owner of this car, or I am the owner of this property? When I say I am the owner, it means that I have some rights on the things that I have. For example, if I say that I am the owner of this room, of this home, it means that no one can come to this home without my permission. Or I am the owner of this car, it means that I will not allow someone to get in my car without my permission. It's a kind of privacy that I have. And if someone wants to use this the things that I have, he or she must have my permission. This is the meaning of ownership. And this is the right that I can get this right from the other people. It is like an agreement between the humans that they respect the rights of each other, and it is another meaning of ownership. So in every ages of our life, we have different kinds of ownership. For example, when we were kids, we have the ownership and the authority on the things that we got them from our parents. For example, maybe at that time we had some toys, and we were the owner of those toys. And when we went to school, for example, we had the school books, and we were the owner of those school books that our parents they bought for us. And when we got older, as a teenager, for example, we can earn some money for ourselves, and then we could earn some money, and we could buy something for ourselves and some gifts from our friends. I want to say that in every ages we have some kinds of ownership according to our ages. But our ownership is based on our domain of this ownership, or the extent that we can have it. Like a king that is that has the great ownership in a country, because the domain of him is his kingdom. Every of us has his or her kingdom, and we know that how many things that we have, and we know our authority on the things that belong to us. And as I told you, this ownership will change according to our ages during our life. And now, if you have some memories from your childhood, for example, if you have some small balls or toys, and if you kept these things in a box in your home, when you open the box and when you look at the things that you were in the past when you were a child, the owner of the things, now when you think about that time, sometimes it is funny to you that what are the benefits of the things at that time, and what is the benefit of the thing this time. It is just to memorize and to remember the memories that you had in the past, and they are just good some memento that about the past, not present. And you will not say that I am the owner of the small boards and I am proud of that, and you will not tell the others that look at this, I am the owner of these toys, because according to your age you have some other desires now, and the desires that you have are different from the desires that you had when you were a child. So our desires will change, and our ownership and the meaning of ownership will change during our life. But what about God? Is the ownership of God changed? And what is the meaning of the ownership of God? It means that God has some rights, and this is the agreement between God and human to not interfere to the rights of God. And when we say that God is the owner, it means that someone has given him this authority to be owner of the things. And what are the properties of God? What is the extent of the ownership of God? As Quran says, the extent and the border of ownership of God is so vast that we cannot imagine. In Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah and in other ayah and surahs that you can go and search about Malik or Mulk, you can find that in one of the surahs of Quran we have Allahu lahu mulku samawati wal ard, means all the things that is in the heaven and on the earth is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It means that He is the owner of all the things that we can see in the sky or on the earth. But again, this attribute of God as the Malik refers to this attribute of Him as Khaliq, as the Hay refers to Khaliq. Malik is refers to Khaliq too. It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of Mulk, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of the ownership. It doesn't mean that someone has given him this right to have the ownership and to have the authority over the things. No, because Allah is the creator of the things. So He has the total and complete ownership and just absolute ownership on the other things. How can I compare my ownership to the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So perhaps when I say that I am the owner doesn't have the real meaning. I'm not the owner of the things. I just have the things because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them. And this is the thinking of faithful people, that they say everything that I have is under the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I do not have anything for myself. If I earn something, it is not because of my effort. I just struggle, I just try to have something. But if I am rich, the things that I have is not under the ownership of mine. It is under the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah is the real owner of the things. This is the exact things, the exact thought that Prophet had. The prophets during the history of prophethood, they had this thinking before. Like Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam, that in Quran we recite that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this authority and gave this ownership to Hazrat Dawood. آتَيْنَاهُ الْمُلْكِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. In one of the ayats of Quran, you can go and you can search it, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I have given Hazrat Ibrahim al-Mulk, means the kingdom. And we know that Sulaiman and Dawood alayhum salam, two great prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they had hikmah, means knowledge, and they had kingdom too. So there were two very great gifts of Allah ta'ala to them. But Quran says that they didn't have these things by themselves. If Sulaiman was king, it was because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Sulaiman didn't claim that I have this mulk, I have this kingdom by myself. And Dawood didn't say this. Why they didn't claim that they have this ownership by themselves? Because they had the hikmah, knowledge. So it is better to, if we want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us something like wealth or a car, a home, anything, the desires that it is natural for human to have these desires, and it is natural to try to reach to these desires. It is better at first to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the knowledge, and after that this authority and this ownership. And again about Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, we have in Quran that Allah ta'ala has given him, and not just him, the followers of him, all Ibrahim, hikmah. Hikmah doesn't mean philosophy here. Hikmah means knowledge, the heavenly knowledge. Allah ta'ala has, he says that I have given you, Ya Ibrahim, I have given you the hikmah, knowledge, and the ownership, and not just to you, to the followers of you. In this, the thinking of faith, faithful people just can think like this, not the ordinary people. And because they think like this about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they can have a system in their life. They can put it in practice, and they can have a meaningful life. Why? Because they are not proud on themselves, and they are not selfish because of their wealth or because of their knowledge. If someone is proud of his knowledge or proud of his ownership, malikiyah, proud of his home, proud of his car, and if he says that, okay, this is my car, this is my home, and he or she has forgotten about the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to him, he cannot be a faithful man or a faithful woman. He cannot or she cannot have the meaningful life, and this is against the faith. It means that it is dhulm. Because of this, in Quran, in these surahs that we have the word of Malik or Mulk in it, we recite that Allah Ta'ala says, I just have given this right, this ownership to my prophets, to my faithful servants. not to the others, not to Zalimin. And we know that Ibrahim was the prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he has given Ibrahim the mulk and the kingdom, but he has not given Namrud, the king of that time, this kingdom. Namrud is among the Zalimin. What do I mean by this? I mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has two kinds of mercy. The first kind of mercy is for all people. For all people, and it is no difference that this man or woman is faithful or not faithful. And there is a special mercy to people who are faithful. Allah doesn't say that I have given Namrud the knowledge. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given Namrud the ownership, the kingdom. But he has given Ibrahim the ownership, and the ownership, I mean the kingdom, and the knowledge too. It is important that when Allah Ta'ala wants to give the abd, the servant of him, barakah, by his mercy, by his grace, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala will give him or her two things. Number one, the ownership, and number two, the knowledge. The ownership and the knowledge, if these two both together, if we have these two both together, we can have barakah in our life. And we can have the bless of God in our life. But if we just have the ownership, if I am rich, if I have wealth, but without knowledge, I do not know that in which way should I spend my wealth. But the difference between my ownership and the ownership of Allah Ta'ala is that one day all the things that I have will be destroyed. And by my death, all the things will become to end. But the ownership of Him is for eternity. And Allah Ta'ala had the ownership in the past, and now, and the future. If I can join my ownership to the ownership of Allah Ta'ala, I can have this ownership for the eternity too. I can have this ownership in this world and in another world. But one day I will laugh at the things that I have now, and I cannot name myself as the owner of the things, as the same as the things that I had when I was child. And I will be ashamed of it. I cannot tell and I cannot name myself as the owner of the things. But if I think that this ownership is under the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if I ask Him to grant me His mercy to have knowledge and the ownership together, I can give the meaning to my life. And then I can think that I am nothing here. I don't have any authority on the things that I have. The authority is just for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is Qadir Mutlaq. It means He has the absolute power. He has the absolute ownership. And He is not just the owner of this world, of the sky, of the earth. He is the owner of the resurrection day. So just let me tell you what is the speciality of that day and why in Surah Al-Hamd we recite that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Malik Yawm ad-Din. He is the owner of the resurrection day. It means that He is the creator of the resurrection day. And what is the meaning of owner? Does it mean that all people at that time is under the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It means that at that time, at that day, just Allah Ta'ala has the absolute ownership. None of the humans can claim that we are the owner. And you know, one of the names of that day is Yawmul Hasra, means the day of regret. What is the meaning of the day of regret? It means that maybe in this world we think that all the things that we have are because of our efforts, and naturally we think that okay, I tried, and if I have money now, if I have a home now, if I have some wealth now, it is just because of my effort. But in that day, in the resurrection day, we do not have anything in our hand. Even we do not have clothes. Even we do not have any friends. We do not have someone to support us. And at that time, we find that we are nothing. Because of this, the day of resurrection day is Yawmul Hasra, means the Yawm of regret. The regret of what? The regret of the life that we spend on an unreal ownership. We regret about the thinking that we have about our life and our properties that we have now. We regret about not spending our money to his right path. But the faithful people will not regret at that time. Why? Because when they are alive in this world, they didn't think that they are the owner. And if God subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he gave them some money in this day, they spend the money in his way, and they are not sad in the day of the resurrection day about the life that they had in the past in this material world. And we should think about that day. We should think about the day that all the covers will remove and we can see just the owner is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one else. But it's astonishing that 5 times a day we recite Malik Yawmuddin, Malik Yawmuddin, Malik Yawmuddin, Malik Yawmuddin, Malik Yawmuddin. And we recite this surah in every sessions when we want to, for example, we have Fatiha or we have celebration, or sometimes we recite it and we offer it to the people who passed away. But it is just a lesson for us that look at this surah and look at this ayah and look at this name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then think about yourself, that who are you and what are you? How can you compare yourself and how can you compare your ownership to the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No one is at that level and no one is in the position of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And why do we sometimes so proud and selfish about our knowledge and about our wealth? These things are not us, not ours. These things are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the real creator, the real God. And as you remember, the first question that I asked you in the first lesson was this, that do we believe on real God? If we believe on real God, why we say that this is my car, this is my home, this is my property? Why we say this? It means that sometimes we worship ourselves, sometimes we worship our car, sometimes we worship our home, and sometimes we cannot spend the things in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because we do not believe that the real owner is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the faithful people are not like this. They sacrifice themselves, the best thing that they have. They will offer the best things that they have, their life. And you know, the life is something that we cannot share to the others. If someone asks me that, okay, you are, for example, 40 years old, would you please give me 20 years of your 40 years old? I say no. If it is possible, it is impossible. But if it is possible, I say no, I will not share my life to you because I love myself and I love this life. But awliya Allah, The people who are the real servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they spend their life in the path of Him very easily. And why do we say in Ziyarat Ashura or Ziyara Imam Hussein alayhi salam, بأبي أنت وأمي ونفسي ومالي وأسرتي, means I want to offer my whole life, everything that I have, and if Allah Ta'ala wants, I will sacrifice myself, my father, my mother, my children, my wife or my husband, my family, all the things that I have, my wealth, if Allah Ta'ala wants. Why? Why we respect Imam Hussein? Because he as a brave man, he as Imam, he as a faithful man, he knew at that time that the real owner is just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he spent all his life, and even he offered his life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this way we can give the meaning to our life. So all the time we must think that, oh Ya Allah, this is this life that I have and the things that I have, and if I am say that I am the owner of the things, the real thing is that you are the owner and I am nothing here. I am nothing here. And if you want to give me something, please give me at first the knowledge to how to spend the things in the way of you. And the second one, the ownership. And this is one of the levels and one of the steps of ma'rifah, irfan Islami, to spend the things that God has given us by His mercy to the way of the creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Spend the things that Allah ta'ala has given us to the way of Him to people, and give the mercy of Allah ta'ala to people. We should be like a link between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and people. And it is a great ibadah, it is a great worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to share the things that we have to people. And by this we prove two things. Number one, O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are the owner, I am not the owner. I am just a link between you and between the khalq of you. And number two, I have ma'rifah, I have knowledge about myself, that I am nothing. When I compare my life to you, I am nothing. When I compare my wealth to you, I am nothing. When I compare my ownership to you, I am nothing. You are the real Hayy and I am not Hayy. You are the real owner and I am not the owner. So you are Hayy and you are Malik. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.